Writing for the masses versus writing to one person. Are they really all that different? We're going to meet Doris in today's episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, Head of Content and Digital Marketing at Insightly CRM. Today I am joined by the one and only Ann Handley. Ann helps businesses stand out in a sea of same. She is the world's first Chief Content Officer, a Wall Street Journal best-selling author of 3 books, and she has founded 2 multi-million-dollar companies. She's a partner at Marketing Profs, an education and training company that trains teams at the world's most distinct businesses. An inductee to the Content Marketing Hall of Fame, she's also an avid collector of old school typewriters and a Tina Fey superfan. Get ready, here comes Ann Handley.
Thank you so much, Val. That was a very generous introduction. So it's amazing to be here. Thank you for having me.
And we're so happy to have you back on Closing Time for a second episode. And just to clarify, you're Ann, I'm Val, but we're going to be talking about a lady named Doris. And I hope people are following along. So who exactly is Doris?
So Doris, the legend of Doris, comes from a story that I have told on stage many times. Doris is the sister of the business icon Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett, chairperson of Berkshire Hathaway, truly just a legend in business around the world. And every year, Warren Buffett writes a letter to shareholders. In that letter to shareholders, which comes out every February, I believe, he talks about what's on his mind, what's on the mind of business leaders, what is boiling from a political, economic standpoint, cultural standpoint, just all of it. And what I love about his letter is that it is widely read, right? You see it every February written up in the financial news. You'll see it dissected everywhere because everybody wants to know, like, what does Warren Buffett think about the state of the economy, of business, of the world in any given year? But what I love about that is that when Warren Buffett sits down to write that letter to shareholders that goes out to tens of thousands of shareholders, that gets dissected by journalists globally, he doesn't think about all those people. He doesn't think about all those readers or all those interpreters. He thinks about one person, and he thinks about his sister, Doris. And I think that writing to Doris is a superpower for us as marketers. Warren said that, he doesn't, she's not an idiot. She doesn't want to be treated like a 5-year-old, but he has this great quote where he says, I try to tell her what she needs to know about the business if we sat down for an afternoon. And I think that we as writers, as marketers, can benefit from that advice because we do need to think about who is our Doris? Like, who is the Doris that this email seeks to engage? Who is the Doris that this social post seeks to connect with? I think everything that we do, who is this Doris that this landing page wants to convert? Like, I think everything we do can benefit from that kind of mindset because the reality, Val, is that the more that you think about one person, the more universally it'll appeal, which sounds paradoxical, but it's 100% true because it's how you show up in the way that you connect with your buyer, with your prospect, with your audience.
So Ann, I have to admit, I'm a super fan. I've seen you speak many times and I have heard this advice before. And when I've applied it in my own work, I have to say it is amazing how much differently you approach any type of writing, but especially email, when you're just thinking about talking to that one person.
Yeah, exactly. It changes the way you communicate. I mean, listen, I do this. Very often my first drafts come across as not writing to Doris, right? They're kind of like, dear valued customer or dear newsletter subscriber. Like, and I don't know why I'm using T-Rex hands, but I feel like I should. It comes across very stilted and like very arm's length. But then when I go back and I read it a second time and I just speak directly to Doris, the Doris and that I'm targeting with this particular piece of content or the subscriber that I want to engage, it changes the way I communicate. It makes my shoulders relax and I just breathe out and I just act a whole lot more human because ultimately, that's what we want to do, right? It sounds so elemental. We are people. We need to connect with other people. But yet somehow when we sit down through in a professional context, we kind of forget that. And so writing to Doris just reminds me of that constantly. And I'm glad to hear it reminds you too.
Yeah, and thank you for being so candid. I think there's this perception when you get to a certain level, like you're a chief content officer, that the first draft is just gold. But really, everybody has to write and rewrite and edit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, listen, my first drafts are spectacularly ugly. And I'm proud of that because the point is that, when I say ugly, I mean that like in a loving way because I'm proud of myself because I've gotten it out. It's on the page or it's on a screen. I've gotten it out of my brain and I've translated it. The more you polish it is the better the product will be. And so the difference between somebody who is a kind of mediocre writer and somebody who produces something special, a lot of times that's just adding a little extra elbow grease and a little extra care. Now, all that to say isn't that we can take forever, especially in marketing. Like, I can't take a week and a half to write an email newsletter like that. That just is not realistic. And so at some point you do have to ship, as Seth Godin says, right? And so I do the best that I can up to the particular deadline that I have. But the trick is like giving yourself a little bit of leeway so that at least when you get there, you're not publishing your first draft.
So progress, not perfection, is something that, we hear on our team a lot, and also ship it because sometimes you just have to let it go.
And you got to let it go with love. Like, that's what I always think. It's like, I can really beat myself up. It's like, oh, I should have done that. I should have had a better, I should have had a more clever metaphor. I should have been a little looser. I should have really thought about what Doris needed from me, like all of those things. But, forgiving myself and letting it go with love is also part of the process too.
So yeah, sometimes I feel with web copy, they kind of beat it into us that it has to be super succinct and super short, but sometimes that contradicts writing to a person. How do you solve for that in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of it as that we need to write short. I think of it as we do need to make each word earn its keep. We need to make each word count. We need to make each sentence actually play a role. And as long as that is true, then I don't worry as much about being succinct. The thing that I do think is true, though, is when you're writing for the web or when you're writing even an email that somebody is going to open up on a screen or on their mobile, that you've got to make sure that it feels like it has some momentum. And what I mean by that is you've got to carry the reader along, right? Because the truth is, Val, that we are just inundated with words constantly all day long, right? I mean, after this conversation with you, I'm going to go back and open up my email client and I'm just going to be like all of us, right? Every single day it's just a deluge. And so we're all looking for a reason not to read. And so I try to not give my reader a reason not to read. And by that, I mean, just following some best practices around that, like writing shorter sentences, not necessarily short length, but shorter sentences. Long sentences are just hard to process on a screen. And so, keeping them short, that's the world we live in. Using lots of white space. White space is oxygen. I was reading an article earlier today and it was really, really good. It was about storytelling and I was really into it. But the paragraphs were, I'm not even kidding. And I was like, guys, I can't. And this is a subject I'm interested in and I care about. And I probably have more tolerance than most people for chunks of gray text on a white screen. But holy wow. I mean, you've got to really think about the experience that you're delivering to your subscriber or to your reader. And so, yeah, I think all that to say, I don't think it's about writing short. I think it's about making sure that each word is there with intention.
I also feel that having white space, as a reader, just lets me scroll, makes me feel like I'm accomplishing something as I'm moving through a piece of content. And so it makes me feel like I want to continue to read. Yeah. So maybe I'm just different or weird like that, though.
No, I think that's perfectly true. Yeah, I mean, I think you want to. My goal is often to stop the scroll. Is to make it so compelling that people want to slow down because they enjoy what I'm writing, and I think that's the kind of goal that I have in my writing. Yeah, I can't measure it in any way, Actually, probably some email clients could, or some email service providers could measure that. But I mean, I don't look at it, so but just in my mind, that's kind of what I want to happen.
Well, that's a great transition to my next point, Anne. Because I'm sure there's an AI tool that either does that or is about to do that, or someone's working on it. But how does AI interact with writing for Doris? Do they contradict each other, or is there some symmetry there?
No, for sure. I mean, like, look, I think if anything, I talked to Chip in an earlier episode around the notion that with AI, it's never been easier to create mediocrity at scale. And I think that is very much why we still need to think about Doris. I mean, if anything, Doris has a bigger role to play, not a diminished one. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think for sure she still matters. She still applies.
So Doris is about writing to one person. And, with salespeople, they want to personalize their emails, but they really want to write to a lot of people. So thinking about personalization at scale, is that realistic, or is it really just an oxymoron?
I think it's a good goal to have as a marketer, but just to take a step back. So think about, like, what does personalization actually mean, right? It's the process of tailoring our marketing messages in one way or another so that it truly connects with the recipient, right? Or the individual who is either opening up a page or opening up an email, or whatever format that content is taking. My fear sometimes with personalization at scale is that we tend to focus on the second half of that word, the part of it. Is that right? Yeah. Instead of the person, we focus on the part of it, because it seems like, oh, that just means that all we need to do is like layer on some technology and automatically it's like personalize, like poof. And it doesn't really work that way, I don't think. I think the best way to think about personalization from a marketing standpoint, anyway, for most of us, especially in the B2B space, is to think about, what is our goal here? Our goal is to connect with one person. And so when you think personalization, remember that it's so important to think about the person before you hot glue on the rest of that word, the piece of it, right? In newsletters especially, I talk a lot about focusing more on the letter and less on the news. In other words, we tend to think about, kind of what we want to say before saying it directly to one person. And so I think the personalization angle is very similar to that.
Can you talk us through some types of tools or maybe tactics where AI can help with personalization?
Right now, some of it is pretty good in terms of allowing us to use personalization in email. And other aspects of it are a little more uneven. But one area where I do think that it can really help us in marketing and sales is in cold prospecting or cold emailing, where AI is pulling in some relevant information that's allowing us to tailor that outreach a little bit more robustly so that it does, connect with your customer or your target prospect. So some of the AI tools that are out there now can look at, their past engagement history with you for sure, their stage in the buying process, the products or services that they care about based on, sort of what they've shared elsewhere, personal information or things that they're posting on social, like all of that. It can kind of aggregate and allow us to use the tool to create more personal outreach to to hit those specific business goals that we have for our programs. And so in that way, I think it can be really, really helpful. But remember that you always want a person at the center of that, right? So don't just create this stuff at scale and then just like blast it out. Like, I really do believe that a person still has to touch each one of those, because the software isn't perfect, number one. But number two, again, it's about the person. It's not about the illustration piece of it. So I think we do have to make sure that we are still at the center of that outreach. So yeah, I think there's direct response, cold outreach is a good use of it. Newsletters, I think, is a little trickier. There are AI tools and capabilities out there that can help us curate content for specific people who are on our list. But I mean, maybe this exists, Val, I'm not sure, but I haven't found a good AI tool that can actually help outside of content creation from a newsletter standpoint anyway. So that's mostly what I've seen.
Well, I'm sure that's coming next. I went to a big football school, and a lot of times I'll get personalized outreach that, references a cheer or something. And I thought that was super unique. And then I was talking to a friend who also went to a big football school, and, she gets that too. So like, it's not super special. It's something that we get a lot during football season, I guess. If you went, she went to Penn State, I went to the University of Florida, but like, it's everywhere.
Right, exactly. And that's like, that's a little bit of a party trick at this point, right? So I think that's what we've seen a lot of that up until now. But where I am really excited and really interested in seeing this go is that, okay, did that actually generate a response from you? And if so, then what happens next? What happens after that? Are you feeling like they're offering you a different kind of experience when they're using AI tools? Or do you start to just feel like, oh, this is just like next level marketing automation? And I think that's where it's a challenge for us as marketers to not let it just be that, but to use the opportunity to create those connections with our audiences. Because, especially in email, that's the name of the game. It's all about, even in direct response email, it's all about nurturing those relationships, because you don't want a one-off, right? You want to build loyalty and referrals, or create those connections long-term, depending on the goals of your program. But I think the more that we can remember that we need to use AI in those ways and answer that question of what happens next, it's not just about making you feel seen in that moment, but are they doing it consistently over time? So yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge and opportunity that we have in marketing today.
So in the 90s, we had merge variables and we thought that was so cool. And now today we have this whole new Pandora's box to open.
I know, it's true. It's true. It's complicated, but I also think it's pretty exciting.
All right, Ann, that's all the time we have for today. Appreciate you joining us.
Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. Thank you so much.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in to Closing Time. Remember, you want to like this video, click the button for notifications, and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss an episode. We will see you next week on Closing Time.